Hello, my friends. Okay, so I feel very inspired to go down this road. And so I'm not really sure why, but when it comes to finding inner peace, one of the main things that we have to understand is that we have to accept reality. If we're unable to accept reality, we are always finding conflict within ourselves, right? And it can be challenging at times to accept certain aspects of reality that we perceive. So I think that has to do with why we're going down this road right now. It's easy in life to feel at peace when everything's going according to how we want it to go. If we're having pleasurable experiences in life, it's easy to be happy. We often find it challenging to be happy or at peace if things are not going the way we want them to, or if we're having displeasurable experiences. If we're perceiving our experience to be displeasurable or not going how we want it to be, it oftentimes creates a feeling of conflict within, and we have a more challenging time maintaining our inner peace. Going along with this is acceptance of reality as it is. So it's easy to love God if we imagine God to be beautiful and perfect, right? And if we create this idea in our head of a Godhead or goddess that looks beautiful and perfect according to what we were taught, it's easier to love this God. Understanding God as everything requires us to recognize that God is also the bad and the ugly, not just the good. And that can cause a little bit of resistance for people who are not at the point of seeing God in everything from meditative practice or other spiritual practices. One of the ways in yoga that we appreciate the bad and the ugly is through the goddess Kali Ma. And Kali is directly related to Tantra. So we're coming full circle with the kind of content that I've been putting out lately. I'm just continuing down the intuitive path of what to share with you. So when it comes to Kali Ma, she is the one goddess that does not appear to be perfect and beautiful. She traditionally is shown as being completely black skin, naked, and not adorned with jewels and other things to make her appearance look beautiful. To a person who hasn't seen her before or is unfamiliar with goddesses, they might look at Kali and think, yikes, you know? And that is because of what we are programmed to think a goddess should look like, right? However, she is very important in our spiritual progress because she depicts the bad and the ugly, a part of divinity that a lot of people have a more challenging time accepting or finding beautiful and appreciating. Things like death, right? A lot of people fear death when death, the physical death, is just a new beginning. And once we gain spiritual understanding and perspective, we're able to appreciate physical death in a different way. So that's just one example. She also is often depicted with the ring of necklace of skulls and fingers, and she is also depicted with her tongue sticking out. So she's not very ladylike, right? She kind of opposes all of the things that we're supposed to think of when we think of a feminine. She also is depicted with either sitting on top of or standing on top of Shiva, her masculine consort. And all of this has significance for us to overcome any obstacles in our mind that are holding us back from appreciating divinity as being everything, the omnipresent divine cosmic intelligence. So understanding Kali in her entirety is important for us to really get over these obstacles that have been programmed or created through our experience, and we can break through these things, and she really helps us do that. So I have a bunch of different things that I want to go over. The first thing I'm going to read, it's from the same, I'll include the link in the description. It's the same article, well, it's a publication that I shared from in a previous video about Tantra. So this is talking about, and if I mispronounce, if you are of Indian descent or from India or Hindu or a yogi that is really great at pronouncing things, excuse my pronunciation. If I mispronounce things during this process of reading these things, it is definitely not out of any disrespect for Indian culture. I have much appreciation for the culture and everything I've learned. Sometimes my pronunciation is just not my greatest strong suit. I'm going to throw that one out there. Again, for people who might not have listened to my podcast when I was doing a lot of stuff about yoga a year or two ago. Okay, so this is the Falaharini Kali. This is a discussion about Kali and her relevance in our lives, and also the significance of the Falaharini Kali Puja Day, which is observed on a new moon day and has gained popularity because it was on this day that Sri Ramakrishna offered all the merits of his spiritual practice at the feet of his consort, Sri Sarada Devi. The word Falaharini means the female who takes away the fruits of our actions. Phala means fruit, the fruit of actions. Whenever we do something, it creates a fruit in the form of tendencies in the mind, and that fruit leads us to do another action. Suppose one listens to something good. It leaves a good tendency in the mind, and it makes one listen to more good things. This cycle makes you come back over and over again to this world because one has to exhaust one's mental tendencies, right? And a side note, the whole point of spiritual practice in India, in Indian culture, spiritual practices, yoga, Hinduism, etc., Buddhism, Jainism, is to escape the cycle of rebirth. And so in order to do so, we must liberate our minds and overcome mental tendencies. So this is very important, which is why Kali is so important to understand fully. She's not just a dark feminine goddess, as a lot of people paint her out to be. Falaharini removes all tendencies by taking away the fruit of one's actions. Harini means a female who takes away. One continues to get the results of one's actions because of the thought. I am the doer and I am the enjoyer. The goal of spiritual life is to remove this thought. This process is hastened by Falaharini Kali. All of us are here in this world because each one of our actions produces an impression on our minds, and that impression propels us to do more actions. If I do good action, it leaves a good impression on my mind, which is called samskara. It is also known as karma or karma phala. And that would make me do another good action. And this goes on till I understand that I am not the doer, till I have the sense of doership, the samskara or karma phala is generated. Kali is called, particularly in the context of Phala Harini Kali Puja, Phala Harini, because she has the power to destroy all the karmas or samskaras of our lives. She has the power to give you and I liberation from the cycle of repeated births and deaths, repeated coming and going. So it is quite significant that Sri Ramakrishna surrendered all the fruits of his spiritual austerities on the Phala Harini Kali Puja day at the feet of his wife. This is not only significant, but it is unprecedented and unparalleled in spiritual history. Never has any spiritual personality, a prophet, or an avatar given so much importance to his wife, to the extent that he has surrendered all the spiritual austerities to her. This was not a wife with whom he had some kind of supernatural or miraculous connection, but she was a wife very much in flesh and body, whom he was married to, and to this person he surrendered all his spiritual austerities. In the life of Sri Ramakrishna, we see a strong connection with the goddess Kali, very much so. Later on, we see the same connection in the life of Swami Vivekananda, and for many reasons, it was very important for Sri Ramakrishna that Swamiji accept the divinity of Kali, and that is why when Sri Ramakrishna saw that Swamiji had accepted the divinity of Kali, he was extremely overjoyed. He started clapping his hands and singing songs, which from what I understand is not uncommon for Sri Ramakrishna. The form of Kali. What is the general form of Kali? Kali is a goddess whose complexion is completely black. There are songs which say that she is blacker than the color black itself. She is pitch black. In Sanskrit, the word for divinity, deva or devi, comes from the root div, which means light. And that is the reason why most of the gods and goddesses are very beautiful. But here is one goddess who is very black. However good granite or marble you may use to make an image of Kali, it has to be black. The form of women or the form of a deity, particularly a female deity, is conventionally supposed to have what is called feminine grace. If you take the forms of Lakshmi or Saraswati, their forms are very graceful, full of femininity and feminine grace. And one thing which is very important aspect of feminine grace is the dress. That is why we see that in the past, queens gave, and even today, social queens give much importance to their dress. However, Kali does not wear anything. She is absolutely in the nude. She is stark naked. First, the strikes at the conventional sense of beauty by being pitch black, and second, she strikes at the conventional idea of feminine grace or femininity by being completely nude. According to the conventional norms of womanly grace, it is expected that a woman talks softly. Society associates a woman with a soft sound, a soft gesture, and a gracious gait. But in Kali is a woman who has her tongue put out of her mouth. When do you do that kind of thing? When you want to insult somebody, or when you're in a frivolous mood, or when you're trying to make fun of somebody. Both of these actions are not considered good in society. There are numerous interpretations of why Kali puts out her tongue, but the image of a feminine divine form, which is nude and black, and with the tongue put out, is quite shocking. And I'm going to, after this section here, I have a book, and it talks about the origins of Kali. So Kali wasn't necessarily originally from the Vedas, like vaguely described, and I have a theory as to why. So stay tuned. Okay, so her appearance is quite shocking for people, but the shock does not stop here. She wears a garland of heads. Another thing which is commonly associated with a woman are ornaments. we find that Sri Sarada Devi was supposed to be given some ornaments at the time of her marriage, but after the marriage, these ornaments were removed. And Sri Ramakrishna funnily remarked that now the bride's family could do nothing. The marriage was already over. In the present times, that incident would probably not have passed off so simply, but that was a remark made in those long gone times. However, later, Sri Ramakrishna got some ornaments made for Sri Sarada Devi because he said that a woman loves ornaments. Even today, women love ornaments. Maybe the form of the ornaments have changed. Women today may not have the same love for golden ornaments. Oh, I think they do. But there are new kinds of ornaments like nail extensions or nail overlays. Oh my gosh, the list goes on and on. Nonetheless, women always love ornaments. Even men love bodily accessories, only they are not conventionally seen as ornaments by society. This is the conventional idea of a feminine form, and that is why we find Goddess Lakshmi or Saraswati decked with ornaments like nose rings and earrings in the temple of the Virgin Goddess in Kanyakumari in Tamil Nadu. However far away one stands from the main deity, you will see a lamp glowing on the nose of the image of the goddess. That is not a lamp, but a nose ring with a gem so powerful that it emits such a strong light as if it were a great lamp. Legend has it that in the past, when the temple was not covered and the image was in the open, ships used to navigate by seeing the light of the nose ring of the goddess, which acted as a lighthouse. So every female form is associated with some ornaments. And here we have the form of Kali, who is wearing a garland of heads as an ornament, not just a garland of heads, but also a garland of fingers. Whatever she is wearing as an ornament cannot be considered one even by the wildest stretch of imagination. This is a stark contrast to our sense of decorum and aesthetics. Most people who are grounded in traditional ideas of feminine beauty and grace, like the Greek or European notions of a goddess, or someone coming from parts of the world not familiar with the image of Kali, are greatly shocked when they see the form of Kali. They are totally shocked because they have never imagined a deity like this, a Black woman in the nude, protruding her tongue and having a garland of skulls. Of course, it still does not stop there. To top it all, the icing on the cake that she is standing on the chest of Shiva. Here you have a feminine form which is standing on a masculine form. It is the greatest shock possible to all conventional ideas of beauty and femininity. All these aspects of Kali have a great ramification and significance. Yeah, exactly what I was saying. We do not generally see the image of Kali in that light. Most of us just go in front of her image and say, "Please protect me. We must pray in fear." Repeat. The iconography and symbology of Kali's image, the air is so loud. The iconography and symbology of Kali's image has great importance. The positioning of the female form over the male form is of particular importance. In the case of Lord Narasimha, we see that Goddess Lakshmi is sitting in his lap. In the case of Lord Vishnu, we see that Goddess Lakshmi is sitting at his feet. We do not see a feminine form other than Kali standing on top of a male deity. And who is the male deity? Shiva, a mendicant. He is a sadhu. I hope I'm pronouncing those words correctly. Shiva is the deity of all sannyasins. His marriage, too, is the highest demonstration of renunciation in the world, because he does not bother about where he stays. He does not bother about what he wears. He does not bother about what he eats, and he is ever blissful. That is why he is the Lord of sannyasins. In Santana Dharma, everything is defied. Santana Dharma does not have any dichotomy of divinity. What is dichotomy of divinity or duality of divinity? It is the belief that there is something divine and that there is something that is not divine. Here we go. Now we're starting to really understand. We're really getting into the meat of why this is important. So to say that some things are divine and some things are not divine is creating a divide, a barrier in our mind, and then how we treat the outside world as well. It governs our behavior. It shapes our perception. It is the belief that there is something divine and that there is something that is not divine, that there is a God and that there is a devil. Santana Dharma does not believe in that. All the traditions of Santana Dharma profess that everything that we see is the manifestation of the one divine principle. And so there is no problem worshiping Kali because Santana Dharma has defied destruction and death. Deified destruction and death. In some regions of India, Kali worship is prohibited for the householders. However, in some other places in India, Kali is worshipped daily in several homes. Same in the case with the worship of Chinnamasta. Kali is the deification of the terrible. Even the word Kali could denote terrible. Kali is the terrible or terror incarnate. How did this form of Kali evolve? Most likely, this form evolved just after the early Vedic times. It was not there in the early Vedic times. It came after the early Vedic times, and this form, for all we know, is not so pronouncedly found in the Vedas. Okay, so this is just like this other book I have. It talks about the mysterious origins. So it's not really clear where this came from. And I'll tell you now, since it's coming up here, my theory is that in the beginning of times, perhaps people weren't separating things as being good and bad. This is good, this is bad. And perhaps over time, people started to establish fears, fear of death, fear of destruction, fear of illness, just fear in general. Maybe that started to grow. Another thing that perhaps grew was not having reverence and respect for the feminine. And as we know, every push has a pull. Every time the pendulum swings one way, it comes back. So if there started to be a prevalence of disrespect of women, I feel that this would be the pushback, right? This would be the pushback of the feminine saying, well, if you don't have respect and reverence, if you don't treat me as being something to be revered, a portal of life, the only being that can bring life into this world is the feminine form. So if there was disrespect that began, this would be the resistance, the pushback to say, okay, well, I can come in this form and I can stand over you. I am the portal of life. Respect that, right? It's like that pendulum pushing back. And oftentimes people who feel disempowered, women who feel disempowered or have been abused or are in other circumstances, often seek out the dark feminine deities to help guide them, to help bring back their personal power. Kali Ma is one of them, and she helps protect the feminine light. So despite the fact that she's depicted with totally black skin and she defies the thought of femininity, she is standing stronger for femininity than any of the deities, because she's saying, this is who I am, have respect for the feminine, because I don't have to be adorned with ornaments. I don't have to fit into your rules in order for you to have respect for me, because there should be respect for me as the portal of life regardless. That's what I think. And I think that that's also why so many women seek out the dark feminine energies, the dark feminine goddesses, to enable them to find that primal power. Because Kali Ma has a very powerful energy. There is nothing more primal or powerful than her energy when it comes to working with goddess energy, from my experience and from the experience I've heard from many women. Okay, so that's my theory. If you agree, you agree. If you don't, you don't. However, it is what I feel came to mind when I was intuitively feeling out all of this stuff, and from my experience and from what I've observed in other women. Okay, so however, we do know that mother worship, or worship of the female divine principle, was quite prominent in the Vedas. So maybe it was lost. That's what I'm thinking. Or a little bit lost, or stepped on, or some pushed back, you know, because we don't see, everything is very masculine and has been since. The form of God being in a feminine is just like mind-blowing for so many people, and it has really been pushed away, tucked in a corner. Any goddess worship in the Western world, for sure. It is found throughout the Vedas. Okay, so mother worship is found throughout the Vedas, but the form of Kali is not so distinct in the Vedas. The form of Kali originated in India and has spread throughout different parts of the world. This form was also adapted in Buddhism. Kali went into Buddhism and came back in a different form to India as a Buddhist goddess like Vajra Devi. Kali is one of the principal forms or goddesses associated with Tantra. There is a lot of confusion regarding Tantra. Today, Tantra is considered a license to indulge in the sensual, but Tantra is anything but that. Tantra is the channeling of human weaknesses by directing them towards God. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that if you want to cry, cry for God. If you want to desire something, desire God. And if you want to love, love God. Channel or direct your impulses and instincts towards God. That is Tantra. Tantra has various streams, but the goal of all streams is to channel all desires towards God. The basic philosophy of Tantra is the divination of desire, albeit in a different way, not by acceding to desires, but by superseding them, by divinizing them. That's a really hard word for me to say right now. Okay, so this goes hand in hand with the video I put out about having spiritual understanding in relationships. Oftentimes, one person or both persons want the other person to bow down to them in dominant, like in submission, right? One person wants to be dominant, the other person submissive, and it leads to energy depletion. So I've heard a statistic that says that single women live the longest and married men live longer than single men. I think it's energy related. I think that it's directly related to energy. So if we want equal or more equal health outcomes when it comes to like men and women, having an equal balanced relationship based on spiritual concepts and ideals would really open up life for that possibility. So if the man wants to be dominant and the woman's like struggling with that throughout life, that's depleting her energy, which affects her mental, emotional body, and then her physical health, and vice versa. So those unhealthy energy dynamics lead eventually to a manifestation of further issues in gross matter, physical body. So having spiritual understanding and saying, I bow down to the divinity within you, and having that be mutual alleviates that issue. And that is why what they're talking about, that is why Tantra is useful, especially in relationships, because we're saying, okay, yes, I desire you. I desire you in ways that some holy people, right? Sex is supposed to be an off topic, and Tantra is not about sex, not something that they have misconstrued. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit here coming up, but it's not necessarily about sex, but sex does have a role in this conversation, right? If we desire sex with our partner, some cultures have been like, oh, that's taboo. We don't want to talk about that. But it's part of human life. It's needed for procreation. And it's not a taboo topic unless you think it's a taboo topic. So desiring sex with your partner is healthy. It's healthy for your energy. It's healthy for connection. And in this way, we see that it can be a sacred union. It can be spiritual sex is a connection on all your energetic levels. People who have sex without spiritual understanding are only connecting in their lower energy centers. A spiritual union with two people that have spiritual understanding are connecting on all their energy centers, from their groin region, the root, all the way to the crown. They're on the same page. So you can imagine the level of bliss and ecstasy that is experienced in that type of sexual union would be much greater than a union that is only using half or less than half of those energetic centers. Okay. Desire creates problems. You take this desire away and channel it towards something divine, something godly, something ennobling, and something that will elevate you. So my idea of this is you don't take the desire away, because if you watch my other video, I have done that and my life force energy was depleted. I had dispassion for life altogether. We need a desire to live. We need a desire to breathe, to live, to continue on this journey. That is desire. So to say that desire creates problems, I disagree from my own experience. So I'm not sure who wrote this, but for me, it kind of started to depreciate my health and everything else. So understanding desire is important. Desiring life, desiring to breathe is desire. So we don't necessarily want to take all desire away, because then life would be over. So if you want to continue to live, that is a desire. However, we can shift our perspective of reality and seeing everything as divinity, and then it is elevating us. Our desires are elevating us. I desire to breathe because I am a temple of divinity, experiencing a manifestation of divinity, and that is elevating. Okay, so having that shift in your perspective to take desire and use it to elevate you is the idea of Tantra. So what are people doing now? They're holding on to desire and bringing oneself down to the level of desire, to the level of the body. That is not Tantra, right? So having a spiritual understanding, a spiritual way of moving through life is the tantric way. Kali has been one of the main deities in tantric practices. Kali has also been the deity of thugs. I like that they use the word thugs. Okay, there is much literature on thugs in India, particularly from the colonial or British period. Many British historians have written books on Indian thugs. I am having so many visuals of what these Indian thugs look like. Let's all pause a moment and imagine what they look like and appreciate that. Okay. They were considered to be a different class of people, mainly dacoits. Not sure what that word is, but I'm sure it's not a very highly auspicious type of person, who lived in India and worshipped Kali. Sri Sarada Devi came across a group of dacoits and saw them worshipping Kali. Kali is seen as the non-Brahmanical goddess. She is the goddess of the common person, just like Lord Jagannath of Puri is seen as the god of the masses. In most places in India, except some places, particularly the southern states, anybody can go into a Shiva temple and even embrace the Shiva linga. That is not the case with the other gods and goddesses. Kali has evolved as a goddess for the common people, for people who are supposed to be of lower classes and were deprived entry into temples. Even today, in many parts of India, they are deprived access to the worship of gods and goddesses. For them, Kali is there. She can be worshipped by anyone. Okay, let's talk about this. So, the caste system. I mean, the fact that God is not open and available equally to all is an issue, right? When we start to say, well, you can only worship God in this way, and you can worship God in all ways, that's going to cause a little bit of an issue. I wasn't planning on getting into this, but I suddenly feel very called to touch on this subject. At one point in ancient times, at the beginning, from my understanding, my research, and my recollection of life, people worshipped God in a polytheistic way because they saw God in everything. They didn't have this conception of a Godhead being away from them. God was everywhere. And so the native peoples of various areas in Egypt and other civilizations, oh gosh, here we go. They really separated things. It's not that they were necessarily being polytheistic, saying that there's a lot of different gods, which yes, they are in a way. However, from my understanding of it now, is that it's not a bunch of separate different gods and goddesses necessarily. It's aspects of divinity. So we are appreciative of the rain because the rain brings the harvest, and the harvest brings the food, and we need food to survive living in this world, this reality that we're in. So they separated it. There's a god of rain, there's a god of harvest, there's a god of food and abundance, and so all of it was separated. The moment that someone came in and said, no, we don't want you to be thankful and grateful for all of these different things. We want you to only worship one thing, and it is the source, the sun. This goes back to Egypt. I believe Nefertiti and Pharaoh Akhenaten or whatever. He was an Amenhotep. Go ahead and laugh, okay? You can. I don't mind being laughed at. My pronunciation is okay. Anyway, Nefertiti and her pharaoh husband, when they said, no, we don't want you to do that. We don't want you to have all these separate deities. We want you to only be worshiping the source, the sun. And they tried to do that. That caused issues. They also became the middleman. They now suddenly, their ego got so inflated that they thought that it was okay to tell other people, you know what, this is how we're going to do it. And I am the middleman now because I have a closer connection than you. And this is what we're going to do. That was ego. That was where things started to go. Because when you say this group of people has a direct connection and everyone else doesn't. That is what separated consciousness. So chicken or egg, was consciousness already staggered, or did some establishment of a caste system stagger consciousness? And I'm not sure who made that decision or why. However, we are seeing the ramifications still today. The global destruction that's happening and this massive shift of people wanting to expand consciousness and have everyone on the planet expand consciousness, we're trying to do that because there's such a destruction and decay of consciousness that people aren't realizing the ramifications of their actions, their karma, the disposable lives that we live, and what that does to the planet that we are all sharing. And it's become an issue. So this is something that I have thought about a few times and have questioned when and how I'm going to approach the topic, but here we are. So I'm just going to leave that one there. Okay. Okay. Another thing, when they started monetizing divinity. That's all I'm going to say on that. Okay. The form of Kali has also been adapted into different forms. In many parts of India, the form of Kali does not go well with the psyche of the local populace. They are unable to accept a female goddess, a feminine divine form in the nude, and so they have covered her up with dress and changed her name. Hence, we find female goddesses similar to Kali in various parts of India, but they are well dressed up and they are some such other changes in an effort to tame and domesticate the divine feminine. Sri Ramakrishna and Kali. Kali also has pronounced feminist underpinnings of her form and advent. Yes, see, so this is the part that I was saying, that females who feel oppressed or abused often end up connecting with the dark feminine or divine feminine form is as Kali Ma. That Sri Ramakrishna chose Kali as his principal deity, and that he chose the temple at Dakshwind. Okay, so from my understanding, he didn't actually choose his temple. I've read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, so this part doesn't seem accurate to me. So I'm going to skip this part. So how he ended up at that temple, from what I understand, Sri Ramakrishna was not a holy man originally. He wasn't studying that, his brother was. And his brother, for some reason, I don't remember exactly, either he couldn't or he turned down the opportunity to take over this temple, or he was in charge of the temple. Basically, it had something to do with his brother. And Sri Ramakrishna ended up taking care of this temple, a temple of Kali. And at first he was like, well, I don't know what to do, because he wasn't trained. But he accepted the position, and then he became like just a huge turning point for a lot of people, and prophetic and all this other stuff. It was just, you know, what was meant to be was meant to be. And a lot of work came after that from his work. So anyway, I'm going to skip that part. Okay, here we go. Kali temple guarded many people of supposedly lower classes, many public women, and many other people of questionable character or morals attended celebrations there. Many gentlemen took offense at the presence of these people and complained to the brother disciples of Swamiji, who was away in Switzerland. The complaint was that such people who are not the gentry should not be allowed to attend the celebrations. When Swamiji heard of this complaint, he strongly objected through a letter that Sri Ramakrishna did not come for the gentry, and that if no members of the gentry attend such celebrations, so be it. Swamiji said that let more and more thieves, robbers, prostitutes, and other such people who are denounced by society attend the celebrations, because it is for them that Sri Ramakrishna made his advent. So Swamiji said that Sri Ramakrishna came for the downtrodden, the ignorant, and the wicked. And if anyone had any problems with such people attending the celebrations, let them not come. In this letter of Swamiji lies the answer as to why Sri Ramakrishna chose this to be his main seat of spiritual practice. So kind of sounds very similar to Jesus, right? When mainstream society turns their nose up and looks down upon others, here comes a person, a prophet, a holy man, a spiritual person to set the record straight and say, no, these are people, these are God's people too. Who are you to say? That's your inner demon saying that those aren't God's people. That's your inner demon saying that those people shouldn't be able to go into the temple. Those are your inner demons, your inner darkness that you don't want to face, telling you that it's okay for you to make judgments and cast them upon others. Sri Ramakrishna reminds me a lot of Jesus. And yes. The great advantage with Sri Ramakrishna is that we have historical documentation of everything, unlike other avatars like Chaitya Mahaprabhu. Okay, not pronouncing that one accurately, I know. Okay, about whom we do not have any documentation or such documentation. Sri Ramakrishna practiced Tantra, Vaishnavism, Vedanta, Islam, and Christianity, and realized the ultimate goals of all of these disciplines. Spiritual giant right here, okay? However, he also practiced all the disciplines of Tantra. He did that to authenticate the path for Kali Yuga. He said that in the Kali Yuga, our bodies are dependent on food. They still are, most of us. We are dependent on material comforts. We are dependent on our desires, and it is our desires that propel us in our daily lives. So if we know how to control desires or to channel them, then and only then can we go towards our goal in life, God realization. For a while, I didn't have to eat. This is my side note. For a while, I didn't have to eat. For a while, I didn't have to do anything. But then I got to the point where, oh, yeah, there's bills to pay. I have to come back to this physical plane. So I do believe that when we enter into the Satya Yuga, things will be different. And since not all of us are capable of that type of lifestyle where we can live that way, that's why things have been slow. And I'm not sure people that have the ability to, this is like the funny flip of the coin, is like, are the people with that much money spiritual enough to the point where they don't need to eat food, where they're completely spiritual beings having a spiritual experience? It's funny because it seems like oftentimes the people of lower caste have more spiritual lives. They find religion and spirituality to be more of a center point of their lives. And in the Satya Yuga, when we get to the point where consciousness is expanded for the entire planet, we'll be at a point that is completely different than today. Sri Ramakrishna showed us a path where you can actually channel desires, and that path is Tantra. There are numerous in-depth studies in Tantra, and there is still much yet to be understood. The acknowledgement of human desire and its transformation by various spiritual practices, including Kali worship, is Tantra. Okay. I think we're going to keep going. Deification of the terrible. Kali is the worship of the terrible. There is a very significant difference between the Eastern and Western psyche regarding the divine principle. In the West, generally anything terrible is considered unholy, devilish, or ungodly. Generally, a snake is not considered holy in Western faith traditions, where anything having a terrible form is considered unholy. Generally, in the West, we do not find the deification of death. In the Judeo-Abrahamic and Islamic traditions, usually death signifies something dark and devilish. Kali worship has a deep socio-cultural influence on the regions where such worship is prevalent. In India, Kali worship is prevalent mainly in Eastern India and parts of Kerala. And in these places, we see the matriarchal system of society. Although in most other places today, the system is changed to patriarchal. The worship of Kali influenced the position of women in society, or it could also be that the supremacy of the feminine brought about the prevalence of Kali worship. Sri Ramakrishna actually fulfilled the worship of Kali by surrendering the fruits of all his spiritual practices to his wife and establishing her divinity. He also told her that he had done not much in the name of spiritual ministry and that she would have to do much more. She was younger than him, so I think that also means that after his transformation of this life, that she, or transcendence of this life, that she would continue on spreading the light of wisdom. That is what happened. Sri Sarada Devi gave spiritual wisdom to countless people. Sri Ramakrishna's disciples were only a handful, but we do not have even a rough estimate of the number of Sri Sarada Devi's disciples. Sri Ramakrishna thus brought about a revolution in religious history by according a superior spiritual position to his consort. Swamiji says that many of the abominable practices going under the name of Tantra in Hinduism are essentially corrupt forms of Buddhist practices. Sri Ramakrishna says that just like there are different doors to a house, some from the front and some from the back, similarly, there are different paths to God, and some paths, like some tantric sects, are the backdoor entries to God. No pun intended, you guys. He calls them backdoor entries because they give much importance to the body and engage in sensual bodily enjoyments. There are many goddesses in Buddhism, many of them very similar to the goddess of Hinduism. Some of them, like Vajra Yogini, are similar to Kali. Devotees of Kali, like Ram Prasad and Kalmakanta, had an intimate relationship with the goddess. The songs they were composed reveal the closeness these devotees had with their chosen ideal. The lyrics of these songs could be considered heresy by many who are believers of God, but are new to the form of Kali. Okay, so I'm going to skip over that part. So basically, people, you know how things diffuse and then they morph and then people misunderstand. So Tantra in and of itself, we've pretty well defined to a point where you can understand. And so if you had only known of Tantra as being related to tantric sex, now you understand that that's not true. We're breaking the misconceptions here. There are certain pertinent aspects of the spiritual practices of Sri Ramakrishna that we talk of, but fail to understand their import and therefore fail to emulate them. As part of his spiritual practices, Sri Ramakrishna once went to the toilet of a person and cleaned the toilet with his hair. So transcending yuckiness, okay? So that whole section that's wordy, I'm going to skip and just say that he did a lot of things that people didn't understand, but he did these things. He took these actions, this karma, to train himself to not attach, not to have attachment to displeasure or pleasure, to be okay with the gross things in life, the good, bad, and the ugly. He transcended, and he did some interesting things to get to his, I mean, we all go through our own ways of gaining spiritual understanding. Some of the stories surrounding him are pretty interesting. So even filth and the abhorrent is a wrong reading of Brahman. In its essence, it is non-different from Brahman. From this standpoint, the worship of Kali is worshiping the one immanent divine principle. Okay, so I think that we have a pretty good understanding about getting over differentiating the good, bad, and the ugly, and accepting reality. Beauty in the terrible. Tantra is about seeing goodness or divinity in the terrible. A person becomes bad because of particular circumstances. Swamiji says that everyone is potentially divine. Agree to agree. Good or bad qualities are just coverings on one's true nature. One does not become good simply because one has the money to buy a good dress. One may have the karma to be born in a respected family and get a good education. However, that person will become good only by his or her actions. Swamiji says that, oh my gosh, I just, my computer is touch screen, and I just like held down the screen for too long and it went a little bit wild. Okay. Swamiji says that if one keeps doing good things alone will come to that person. If a person keeps on doing bad things alone will attract that person. One person becomes good and better, and the other person becomes bad and then worse. Kali worship is the worship of the terrible. Why should this worship be done only in the temple? True worship of death and the terrible should be the worship of the immanent. If one sees a drunkard, a rogue, or a criminal, should not one worship them? Are they different from the immanent, conscious, divine principle? But we do not worship them. Instead, we abhor them. Okay, so I'm not even going to go into, I mean, this is pretty high level spiritual work once you're getting into this type of stuff, and I don't want it to be confusing for anybody. So basically in yoga, when it comes to mental training, anytime attachment or aversion come up in our mind, it's an obstacle to full enlightenment. So when we have a pure mind, we no longer differentiate between good and evil. We see it as it is, as absolute reality. And attachment is just as much of an obstacle for us to overcome as aversion. So if we find ourselves creating aversion to things, that is holding us back, because the truth is oneness, everything, one infinite ocean of consciousness, or however, Brahman, however you want to describe it. God is everything. That's the ultimate truth that we come to in meditation. So if you mentally create aversions saying, well, that's ugly, that must not be God. That seems evil, that must not be God. Or that seems like God is merciless. Why is he allowing this? These judgments hold us back from accepting reality as it is and from reaching enlightenment. It takes mental training. That's just like a whole nother, that's regular yoga sutras, Raja yoga, mental training that we're talking about there. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there when it comes to that document. And I mean, I read the majority of the section on Kali. Okay, moving on. Interestingly enough, the bookmarker that I was using is a oracle card. It's the Mars oracle card, which is funny because Mars is the god of war, aka Aries, and is all about conflict and stuff, which could potentially also have something to do with the emergence of Kali and the ideal concept of Kali Ma as a feminine form. Sorry, I didn't finish my sentence. Okay, introducing Devi. Mind and words are powerless to encompass your glory, whose extent is as immeasurable as the cosmic space. So we're going to get into a little bit more, I have a feeling, of what the feminine actually is as far as a cosmic force. I know in the second section that I have a bookmark for, we definitely will get into that. So the oneness, when looked at in a dualistic perspective, when broken down into masculine and feminine, which originally it wasn't, and then it somehow became dualistic and then polytheistic, and now back to dualistic and then back to oneness. It's kind of a cycle, isn't it? So here we go. This book is so large. I'm trying to figure out how to be able to see the words and keep my mouth close enough to the microphone for you to hear. Okay, here we go. We're gonna go right here. Is she one or is she many? Is she the one in the many? Are the many all parts of the one? In this poetic vision, she is one, she is all, and all else is but a faint reflection of her radiance, her vitality, her potency. As we view her varying portrayals in stone and bronze and on paper and cloth, however, it becomes apparent that individual believers place importance on different facets of Devi's being. So here we're no longer just talking about Kali Ma. We are talking about the great goddess, the Devi, the feminine form, the goddess of the feminine. And there are many facets and faces to her. In many cases, devotees are concerned only with the immediate deity who controls their lives and deeds, the goddess Lakshmi, the local deity Yalama, the Bhuta spirit Chika, and believers within the culture accept apparent contradictions. An Orthodox Tamil Brahmin, for example, would hold forth with eloquence on Shankara's philosophy of monism, but there's no second O, so monism, which is Advaita, which states that there is but one ultimate entity. He would declaim as delusion, Bhranti, the notion that the human soul is an entity separate from the universal soul. The same educated Brahmin, well schooled in Sanskrit, which he actually spoke with a group of his friends, would also approve of puja, or ritual worship, and would watch his wife anoint and place flowers before an entire group of little images. Perhaps it is unreasonable to demand logical consistency in matters of devotional faith, and is largely those once removed who are able to take a more theoretical view. Okay, so going back to that topic about how at one point people came in and said, this is how you should worship. This is what you should worship. This has like, I'm feeling called to come back to this topic. So if we allow people to feel close to divinity in the way that they choose, that removes any of the struggle. As soon as we try to control other people's conception or connection with divinity, it causes conflict. So just wanted to point that out. I need to pause this and figure out a better setup so I can read this to you. Okay. Such images as Ardhanari, a miraculous conjoined manifestation of the god Shiva and the goddess Parvati, raise similar questions. In the image, male with female half added, question mark. Right, like Shiva and Shakti. So if you look at an image of Shiva and Shakti, half of it appears feminine and half of it appears masculine. We're going to get into the cosmology in a minute, in a couple minutes. The use of the name Ardhanari, literally half female, suggests that the male has absorbed the female, and the myths about this form indicate the same. Perhaps the form could be described more accurately as half male, half female. Does such imagery reiterate that the divine is both male and female? These questions would seem curious to Hindu worshippers. Consider this splendid verse attributed to Mandana, in which Ganesh, the elder son of Shiva and Parvati, answers his younger brother's queries. When father and mother became a single body, what happened, elder brother, to the other halves of each? Victory to Ganesha, who explains to the young prince, the one on earth was born as every man and the other every woman. Right, so when we're talking about divinity, divinity is everything. Divinity is genderless. Divinity is both male and female, right? So yes, conceptually, when we're trying to think about divinity, sometimes there's gender related. I have been reading another book that talks about a concept of how the evolution of creation happened. So not cosmology, but anthropomorphology or something. I don't have that book right in front of me, but it does talk about how things manifested. And before there were separated male and female forms, there were forms in this existence that were both male and female, that were asexual, that were capable of reproduction without another person. So as things continued to break down, then there became a separation between masculine and feminine physical forms, men and women. However, energetically, each individual still has energetic qualities of masculine and feminine. Okay, turning the page is going to be impossible with the microphone on the book. Okay, so I don't want to hurt your ears with moving the microphone around. It's very sensitive. It's totally ASMR potential. Okay. So the juxtaposition of ancient and contemporary forms of Devi in this introductory section may well be startling. The placement of At the Hub of Things, a monumental late 20th century fiberglass expression of the great goddess, in juxtaposition with, am I saying that word correctly? I mean, I hope so. I read a lot and don't speak out loud to people that much, so I don't have a chance of being corrected with my pronunciation. With two magnificent 11th century stone images of the great goddess, one in her forceful yet nubile form as slayer of demons, and the other in her gentle role as bestower of music and learning, highlights the pervasive, persisting power of Devi. Living in the ancient religious environment, the sculptor of the 11th century images probably thought of the Devi as the feminine power Shakti, the force behind creation. Intriguingly, the 20th century creator of the fiberglass image also identifies the feminine as a creative force. As a man, there exists within me a feminine part, the creative and the mysterious part. Okay, so the Shakti, the feminine, the moon, that's why it's more elusive, right? It's more introspective. That feminine energy also relates to the sacral chakra. So the sacral is the center that houses sexual energy and creativity, which is why they're saying within the man exists the feminine, because these aspects have been attributed to the feminine energy, the Shakti, the force of creation. So without the feminine force, there would be nothing. And that's when we talk about things in a dualistic way, right? We need the force as well as the matter. And if you look at procreation, right? The woman is the portal. Her womb, she houses the baby for development. And then with her force, she births things into creation. So you can look at things on the scale of the microcosm or macro. Here we go. I must be need a break. The macrocosm or the microcosm, right? So if you sit and ponder and reflect and meditate upon procreation, for example, between man and woman. Man has the matter, the seed, and woman has the force to bring things into creation. She is the portal of life. So when we think about these things in humanity, and then we can apply what we have understood in meditation and reflection upon these things to the macrocosm, that's how we can come up with theories of cosmology. Or you can try to do it the opposite way. But since nobody necessarily, unless, you know, in deep meditation, you've been shown the beginning of creation by higher dimensional beings, or however it happens, it can be challenging to come up with a theory of cosmology. So by observing nature, observing what we can see and perceive with our senses and experience, we can gather information about the macrocosm in creation, the creation story. Okay. It is interesting too that this observation reflects the overlap, the convergence of male and female. In fact, Anish Kapoor speaks of the androgynous as a primordial unity anterior to the distinction between genders, the double in which all opposites converge. Defined in this way, the word androgyny may indeed describe the ancient images. Carved in stone in the 1st century, created in bronze in 10th century Nepal, or painted on paper in early 20th century Calcutta, images of Ardhanari reflect this powerful concept that unites opposites. Yin, yang. Yin exists within yang, and yang exists within yin, and together it makes the whole, the oneness. It's described in a lot of different practices, the Tao and Buddhism, and a lot of mostly Eastern practices. So let me mute this so I don't hurt your ears, and I'll show you the images. Okay, voice is back. Okay, let's talk about the last topic, which this video is going long. However, I do feel very inspired. Somebody out there must need to hear this, or many people, or maybe not, but either way, I do feel inspired, divinely inspired. I don't question. So, here we go. The Devi as a cosmic force. The worship of a mother goddess as the source of life and fertility has prehistoric roots, but the transformation of that deity into a great goddess of cosmic powers was achieved with the composition of the Devi Mahatmya, Glory of the Goddess, a text of the 5th to 6th century when worship of the female principle took on dramatic new dimensions. Images of Devi killing the buffalo demon Mahishasura, her most renowned feat, appeared across the country in caves and temples, in metal and stone, in clay and paint, perhaps because of the multiplicity of local names assigned to this much applauded manifestation. Later textual sources generally use the generic appellation of Mahishasuramardini, or killer of the buffalo demon. So it has been said that, and I've said this somewhere on social media recently, it has been said that the highest calling of a woman is to help reunite a man with his soul, to guide him back to union with divinity. And I think that is where this is where that idea comes from. Oftentimes the feminine, if given the opportunity to be in her feminine energy, is spiritual, oftentimes more spiritual than the man in the relationship who is sitting in masculine energy, because in the world we live in, the masculine energy is the protector, the provider. And that's how things had been. So together they form a union, and the woman helps the man fight those inner demons, because the man was the one out in the world in Maya, protecting, providing, being exposed to all of these things, while the woman oftentimes was at home and living a more spiritual existence. And this allowed for balance and a harmonious union between men and women. Now we're seeing, evolution and things have changed. However, this is where it comes back to. The lowest form of a feminine form, or the feminine energy, is to seduce a man, bringing him further away from his soul, further away from union with divinity, further away from this higher ideal, this higher perspective, this higher way of life. And no judgments here. This is just spiritual concepts and ideals that people talk about. So, all right. Portraying the actual battle between Devi and the forces of Mahishasura, a Pallava sculptor created a grand tableau in a rock-cut granite cave in Tamil in 7th century. Lithely poised on her lion, with her strung bow outstretched, as she reaches into her quiver for an arrow, the graceful 8-armed goddess engages in combat, aided by a host of female warriors and dwarf-like ganas, attendance generally associated with the god Shiva. While the battle is by no means over, the artist hints at the outcome in the retreating stance of the demon, portrayed as a gigantic man with a buffalo head. His warriors are all poised in the diagonal stance of retreat. The great goddess killing the buffalo demon has various names. Okay, we're going in all these different places to tell you the names, and they're all going to be mispronounced by me, so I'm going to skip that part. So basically the idea is that the Shakti, the feminine aspect of divinity, helps the masculine slay the demons. And I think that we're coming full circle when it comes to Kali Ma. Kali Ma was standing on top of Shiva because in other things I've read, she was unleashed upon the world to slay demons, and in her bloodlust end up killing Shiva, which she later felt very bad about, or whatever. Like, she realized that she had that bloodlust, and she ended up killing Shiva. Okay, but like, the point is, she wasn't doing it out of hatred. She was doing it out of protection. She was trying to fill her role as the feminine by guiding people, men, back to their inner divinity, helping slay the demons. And when men are resistant, she didn't stop, because that was her role. That was what she was intended to do. So food for thought when it comes to the world we live in today, right? I'm gonna stop here when it comes to reading out of this book. I feel there's just like an energy saying, I think that we've covered what needed to be covered. So when it comes to respect of the feminine energy and creating space for the feminine energy and understanding the feminine energy, I think that we can gather that the feminine is sacred, the feminine is the portal of life, and her presence is vital. She is the force. We didn't get into the philosophy about consciousness, Purusha, the separation between understanding these things, or even the electrical and magnetic differences in the electromagnetic spectrum when it comes to masculine and feminine energy, but all of it comes to the same final understanding. Both men and women, both masculine and feminine energies are needed in coherence to be able to continue evolving, expanding, and really living harmoniously. And so in your own experience, if divinity comes to you in various forms, remember to create enough space to feel the vibration and to recognize if there's a lesson available. Is this person really an enemy? Or is this person divinity embodied, trying to help me somehow? Trying to help me face something that I need to see within myself, trying to help me grow, evolve, trying to help me battle my own demons by recognizing them. Sometimes we exist to each other as mirrors to help us internally reflect and see something that we might not have seen before. Okay. My final question to leave you guys with. We've talked about the importance of the feminine. We understand the importance of the masculine, the seed of life, the protector, the provider. And my question remains, what is the highest calling of a man? What is the highest calling of the masculine energy? And is that something that we talk about enough? If we don't know what it is, We can't talk about it. If we don't talk about it, the masculine energy isn't going to know what to do or how to direct its energy. From my understanding, as you know, being a person of the divine feminine energy and doing my research in the work that I do, I can see the divine masculine energy and the importance of men is very much to protect, to provide, to create space, because the feminine energy is the force in which life continues on. And without having proper protection and provisions, the feminine energy isn't going to be able to continue that forceful energy of creation. Leave your comments. Let me know your thoughts. I will read them. And if I have a response or some intuitive anything, I will respond with that. That's all I'm gonna, I think we've covered a lot today. That's all I got for you folks. Until next time. Okay, my friends, I thought we were done. We're not quite done. So we could go on and on discussing what this mission was of Sri Ramakrishna. So I went back, I felt called to go back to the PDF document that I'm going to leave the link to, or the website to, in the description. And you got to hear this part to bring it all together. So Sri Ramakrishna said that, hold on, we're not there yet. Okay, the whole thing can be very well summed up in something that Swami Vivekananda said about Sri Ramakrishna's mission on earth in his life. In this age, the Brahma Kundalini, the mother who is responsible for the creation, preservation, and destruction of the universe, has been awakened by the fervent prayers of Sri Ramakrishna. Here, Swamiji is referring to the cosmic aspect of the Kundalini. So the cosmic force, not within each individual human being, but on a cosmic level. Regarding Swamiji's statement, Swami Shivananda commented, "No wonder the individual Kundalini will be awakened now. That is why we see symptoms of great spiritual upsurge everywhere." In other words, the universal spiritual consciousness has been awakened, so no one anywhere can remain unaffected. Again, the more we make an effort to connect with this consciousness, the more we will gain from it. And this was the mission of the Divine Mother and of Sri Ramakrishna. Ooh, goosebumps. The significance of Kali worship. But what did this worship of Kali actually mean to Sri Ramakrishna? Sri Ramakrishna had various terms that he used to describe the philosophy behind the worship of the Divine Mother. And these are the same terms that Vedanta uses: Prakriti, Shakti, and sometimes Maya or Mahamaya. The term Shakti is especially used in the sense of power or energy. In this sense, it is also used to refer to the Kundalini, the coiled up serpent power that normally lies asleep within each individual. As Sri Ramakrishna said, the primordial energy, Adya Shakti, resides in all bodies as the Kundalini. She is like a sleeping snake coiled up. But as we just saw, she not only resides in individuals, she has a cosmic aspect as well, right? The microcosm, macrocosm. The term Prakriti was originally used in the dualistic Sankhya philosophy. Swami Saradananda writes of Sri Ramakrishna's explanation to the devotees of the two cosmic principles in the Sankhya philosophy, Purusha and Prakriti. Here we go. This is why, for full understanding, this has to be done. I had to come back and put it all together for you guys. One day we were discussing Sankhya philosophy, describing the origin of the universe from Purusha and Prakriti. The master told us, according to Sankhya, Purusha is not the doer. It is static. Prakriti does everything. So Prakriti is the feminine. Purusha would be the masculine. Purusha is a witness to those actions, but Prakriti cannot do anything by herself. She needs the help of Purusha. The master's audience included office clerks, accountants, doctors, blah, blah, blah. None of them were scholars. When they heard the master say this, they stared at one another. The master understood their confusion and said, "Hello, haven't you seen what happens in the house during a wedding ceremony? After issuing orders, the master sits and smokes tobacco from a hubble bubble. The mistress runs around the house and supervises all the activities. Her sari is stained with turmeric, and she welcomes the ladies with hand gestures and animated faces. She reports to her husband from time to time. This has been done this way and that way and that way. This has to be done, this other not to be done." While smoking, the master listens, and nodding his head, he assents to everything, saying, "Yes, yes." It's just like that. All of them laughed, listening to the master's explanation of Sankhya philosophy, but they understood it. So here, in Sri Ramakrishna's illustration, we can understand that in the Sankhya philosophy, there is a dualism between Purusha and Prakriti. They are two separate principles, though Prakriti is dependent on Purusha. Yet later, this same term, Prakriti, evolved in the non-dualistic philosophy of Advaita Vedanta to mean Shakti. And Sri Ramakrishna sometimes used the word in this sense also. Once he said, according to Vedanta, Brahman and its power, Purusha and Prakriti, are identical. That is, they are not two different entities. The same substance appears sometimes as Purusha and sometimes as Prakriti. As Swami Saradananda related, when he saw that we did not understand this, the master said, "Do you know how it is? It's like a snake. Sometimes it moves and sometimes it remains motionless. When it's still, it represents the nature of Purusha. Prakriti is then united with Purusha and they become one. When the snake moves, Prakriti is then working, as it were, separating herself from Purusha. So Prakriti is the energy, the force. So in this last example, Sri Ramakrishna used the words Purusha and Prakriti in the same way that he often used the terms Brahman and Shakti. But besides the example of the snake moving and being still, he also would give another example to define these terms, such as milk and its whiteness, or fire and its power to burn. That is to say, just as you cannot separate milk from its whiteness, or fire from its power to burn, you cannot separate Brahman and Shakti. They are one and the same. Sri Ramakrishna actually made some very interesting comments to M about the worship of Shakti that we do not find in the gospel. One day he said to M, "He who is Brahman, he is Shakti and also the Divine Mother. Without acknowledging Shakti, no one can understand what Brahman is. Brahman can become manifest only through Shakti. What is fire? It is something that has the power to burn. Fire would become useless if it could not burn. As fire and its power to burn are no different, so Brahman and Shakti are the same. When we describe them, they seem to be two different things, but in reality, they are one. The one has become many, that is the manifestation of his power." Then Sri Ramakrishna said to M, and this point should especially be noted as we shall come back to it later. How is it possible to realize Brahman without taking refuge in Shakti? The words that are all used to call on him, the sound that is used to worship him, those are all functions of Shakti. have originated from Shakti, and you move and walk by means of her power. As the song says, thou art the moving force, and I the mere machine. I am the chariot, and thou the charioteer. I move alone as thou. O mother, movest me. So if we move, walk, and speak by means of her power, then why are we in this delusion? Why do we not know this? Because she, this Shakti, is also Mahamaya, the great enchantress. She deludes everyone. As the poet says, when such delusion veils this world through Mahamaya's spell, the Brahma is bereft of sense, and Vishnu loses consciousness. What hope is left for men? In the Advaita philosophy, this delusion is produced in two ways. There is the Avarana Shakti, the power that veils or hides the reality from us, just as a screen hides whatever is behind it. And then there is the Vikshepa Shakti, the power of projection, which projects this world of name and form and duality. Under this aspect, we become enchanted with this world of duality, and we do not seek the reality that underlies it. So what hope is left for us if this Shakti, this power that controls the universe, is the very same power that deludes us? According to Sri Ramakrishna, Mahamaya or Shakti deludes us, yes, but she can also reveal the truth and grant liberation. Grace also is there. And he says, if we take refuge in her, it is possible to become free from this delusion, to realize Brahman and attain supreme bliss. Why? Because she is also the mother, the divine mother of the universe. The motherhood of God. This is the last section. It's not possible to know exactly when the universal goddess became worshipped as mother. Probably the recognition of power associated with motherhood came in very ancient times. So this worship of the universal goddess as an expression of the power of motherhood also is very ancient, even prehistoric. But this is not quite the same as the worship of the goddess as a mother in a devotional sense. As we see Ram Prasad or Kamal Kanta or in Sri Ramakrishna's life. In the Devi Mahatmyam or Sri Sri Chandi, which was probably written around the 5th or 6th century, the goddess has both benign and terrible aspects, but she is always the powerful goddess who destroys evil and protects the gods. And though there are a group of these goddesses called matrikas or mothers, who near the end are absorbed into the body of the great goddess, she herself is only once addressed in the Chandi as mother. Rather, she is invariably addressed as Devi goddess or by one of her many names such as Ambika or Narayani. Her aspect there is too formidable to think of her as mother. The portrayal of the goddess as a mother is in a devotional sense, seems to have come later. In South India, the goddess Shri or Lakshmi was regarded very early as the consort of Vishnu and as the giver of all that is Shri, auspicious. But gradually she became the mediator between the devotee and the Lord, and at this last point became stressed more. She became thought of more as a mother. In Parashara, some book, he says, having caused him, the Lord, to forget our sins, you make us your very own children, so you are our mother. Of course, Shri always has a beautiful form and has totally benign aspect, unlike the goddess Kali. So it is very easy to regard her as a mother. But most likely the devotional movement that was started in 16th century by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Bengal which later spread throughout northern India, could not help but affect the Shaktas, the worshippers of the Divine Mother in North India. This movement, with its emphasis on personal relationship with God, was ready-made for the worship of the goddess as a mother, including the goddess Kali. Before this, the goddess was worshipped by the Shaktas more for power. But after this time, we see the rise of poet saints among the Shaktas, such as Ram Prasad, Kamalakanta, and Premik, all of whom worshipped Kali as mother, albeit a powerful mother. We should also keep in mind from what we have just seen that this evolution of the goddess as the mother was, as Sri Rama Krishna would say, done by her at her will, right? Because the feminine force is the force of reality, the Prakriti. But how do we conceive of a fierce-looking goddess like Kali and one who treads on her consort as well? How do we think of her as mother? Perhaps these saints could do it, but what about us? Swami Sahananda had an answer for this. Whenever anyone would voice any doubt about the worship of Mother Kali, he would say, would you rather have a namby-pamby mother, or do you want someone who will fight for you? Ooh, I got goosebumps. Yes, Kali is certainly not namby-pamby. But then we could go and argue Durga and Jagadhatri also carry weapons, yet they do not have such a terrifying aspect. So why Kali? I think Heinrich Zimmer says, in reference to the symbols and mythology of India, can also be applied to the images and deities in India. Also be applied to the images of the deities in India. Okay, I thought I misread that. They are just not something that we can intellectualize. The mythologies, he says, are effective primarily on a subconscious level, touching intuition, feeling, imagination. Their details impress themselves on the memory, soak down, and shape the deeper stratifications of the psyche. The myths and symbols of India resist intellectualization and reduction to fixed significations. Such treatment would only sterilize them of their magic. Again, he says, the mythology of India stirs and feeds the unconscious. So most likely, this is true with regard to the deities as well. Deities like Durga, Kali, Shiva, Sri Ramachandra, and others affect us on another level, an unconscious level. We don't know why we are drawn to them, we just are. Too much intellectualization does not solve anything. Yet, that does not mean we cannot ask ourselves, what is this image of Kali saying to me? We gave some of the symbolism of this image at the beginning, but there are a few more points we could add that may have a deeper impact on our understanding of her. First of all, the name Kali refers to her color, which is black and represents the infinite. But it also refers to time. That itself gives us a clue to her function, because time, space, and causation are all processes of Maya, the great illusion. Time, as we all know, truly is the all-destroyer. Nothing in this world can escape from destruction due to time. As we have seen, Kali has 4 arms representing the dualities of this world. Her 2 right arms represent the benign aspect. She bestows fearlessness and boons with those, while her 2 left arms, holding a sword and a severed head, and most of the rest of her represent the terrible aspect. Here we have her function of causation, creating and destroying, as well as the dual experience in this world. Everything comes from her, and everything dissolves back into her. Again, she is standing on and subduing, you might say, Shiva, the transcendent absolute aspect of God, the ultimate reality beyond name and form and all dualities. This, we could say, is her function of the finite, which is within space, veiling the infinite. Thus, Kali is herself the Maya that we must recognize and worship in order to realize the infinite. Yet, She is also the infinite. Kali and Shiva are two aspects of the same reality, like fire and its power to burn, as Sri Ramakrishna says. So what do we have here with Kali, in spite of the fact that one part of her is offering us fearlessness and boons? The major part of her is terrifying. She is Mahamaya, the great illusion herself, and she looks like the embodiment of destruction, like the symbol of death. Death, as we all know, is terrifying, yet death is a natural process of life. Why should something that is so perfectly natural terrify us? It terrifies us because we are in complete ignorance of it. Mahamaya, made up of time, space, and causation, has deluded us so much that we cannot even be sure of our own existence after the death of our body. So Kali, as Swami Vivekananda himself says, is the symbol of death. As he says in his poem, Kali, the Mother. For terror is thy name, death is thy breath, and every shaking step destroys a world for here. Thou time, the all-destroyer, come, O Mother, come. So Swamiji is asking us to welcome death and let her destroy everything. Then Swamiji says, who dares misery love, and hug the form of death, dance in destruction's dance. To him the mother comes. So we have to love misery and hug the form of death and dance in the destruction's dance. All of these prerequisites, not just one or another. They all have to be there. Who will hug death when they are happy? And who wants to be miserable? Everyone wants to be happy and happy alone. Right? Overcoming aversion. Accepting absolute reality, transcending. Okay, I'm gonna skip down. As Sri Ramakrishna says, we have originated from Shakti, so we are her children. Will a child not acknowledge its own mother? Moreover, as Sri Ramakrishna says, we move and walk by means of her power, like the snake in motion. So we must acknowledge that the power of our mother, the power is dwelling right within us. Through this power, we function. Again, we can remain in ignorance, or we can acknowledge her, realize her, and become free. She is one with Brahman, so it is through her grace, that we realize Brahman. Thus, we must worship that mother and take refuge like a child in that mother. And that mother goddess, whom Sri Ramakrishna himself acknowledged, was Kali. Moreover, we can understand from this that she is the mother of us all, the whole universe, no matter what race, religion, nationality, or anything else we might be. We are all here. Oh my gosh. We are all her children, all brothers and sisters in her. Nowadays, a universal global consciousness has been awakened, and it has been awakened by her. So likewise, we need an awakening of harmony within us, of seeing the whole world as our own, as Sri Sarada Devi says. And for that, we must accept all. We must accept everyone as her child. It seems, in fact, that this was what she wants now, accept everything, the good, the bad, all of it. But see everything as the manifestation of her. It is all her. Accept her and dance the play of this life with her. See her, the mother, in all things and beings, in the good and in the bad and in everything. Then surrender to her, take refuge in her. And after that, then we find that hiding behind the terrible mask is a real mother goddess of pure love. And we find that she has a mysterious kind of magnet, a magnet of pure love that she uses to draw us to her, a love we cannot explain. Okay. I think, my friends, that wraps it up. I think we're good. Until next time.